Where Are You Headed by Sarah R. Speed. We are trains on a track, moving through life at warp speed. Please keep all arms and legs inside the moving vehicle at all times. The years pass like a flip book, faster than we can absorb, but the train does not stop. We press our faces to the windows to try and get a good view, and we ask each other, "Where are you headed?" And there on the train we decide. We want to head toward the promised day. We want to head toward crowded tables and long, healthy lives. We want to move in the direction of joyful children and hopeful communities. We want to move closer to God with every mile of track. And that does not happen by accident. So it's time to ask, where are you headed? And who's driving that train? Where are you headed? That's the question that hovers in the air on Palm Sunday. Jesus' unconventional and unexpected entry into the city of Jerusalem parallels the extravagant parade of Pilate, the Roman governor. As both leaders enter the city for the Passover, they embody different directions. Pilate commands military dominance and imperial power. The royal procession teems with symbols of imperial power: cavalry on horses, foot soldiers clad in leather with the sun glinting off metal helmets, banners and weapons declaring their presence and intimidation their purpose. The army was there to quelch dissent during the holiday of Passover, during which Jews would have been streaming into the city from throughout the region. And at the other end of town, a peasant from Nazareth rides not on a war horse, but a humble donkey. His entry is declared not by soldiers with weapons, but by ordinary people with palm branches and cloaks. The smaller crowds around him don't cast their gazes down to avoid scrutiny, but beg of him, "Hosanna, save us." Where were they going? The backdrop to both of those processions was the city of Jerusalem, notably the home of the temple. While the temple was, of course, the center of religion for the Jewish people, it had also become the center of the imperial tax system. Beginning in 6 CE, when Rome removed Herod the Great's son, Archelaus, from his throne over this part of the Jewish homeland, they installed the temple authorities as their imperial managers. So the high priests and temple administration had the responsibility for collecting from the people and taxes and paying the annual tribute due to Rome. The records of debt began to be stored in the temple. This awkward and perhaps contradictory role placed the temple into contested territory. We have to disentangle our modern notions of the separation of church and state, or religion and politics, and understand that this scene is set squarely in the crosshairs of the question of imperial domination, legitimated and carried out by religious authorities. Religion was political. Politics was religious. The people gathered in the city that day probably didn't feel like they had much of a choice. But a courageous few gathered with Jesus to stage this political street theater, to show the people that they could indeed go in a different direction. And so when Jesus enters, the echoes of the prophet Zechariah ring in the people's ears, declaring an end to the imperial dominion of another ancient empire over the people of Israel. The prophet Zechariah says, "Then I will encamp at my house as a guard, so that no one shall march to and fro. No oppressor shall again overrun them. For now I have seen with my own eyes. Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem. and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. Jesus is going to the temple. He is going as the Prince of Peace to challenge the imperial system of domination. He is going to end oppression at the hand of violence and install a kingdom of peace. Where are you going? Where are we going? It's easy to live our lives without really heeding that question. Easy to exist on the treadmill of days without looking up and seeing where our path has taken us. Where will we be if we stay this course? And then there are generational moments that force us all to look up and wrestle with the paths we have collectively chosen. When I was in late elementary school, I remember vividly sitting on the couch after school, the sun streaming through the window behind me as my brother and I watched Animaniacs on TV. Then all of a sudden, our cartoon was cut off with breaking news, announcing that a shooting was taking place at Columbine High School. Well, this wasn't the first school shooting ever. It was a generational moment, not unlike a political assassination or 9/11 that is marked in our collective memory. That was 24 years ago. When I was in middle and high school, we began to practice lockdown drills regularly. And now my 2-year-old and 5-year-old practice hiding in bathrooms and closets. Their teachers tell them things like, "It's in case there's ever a wild animal that we need to be safe from." How did we get here? How did we collectively allow the unthinkable to become so routine that our responses feel almost rehearsed? And how can we continue to ignore collectively the cries of the children, shouting, "Hosanna, save us"? Hosanna is not a cry of praise, but a cry of desperation. Hosanna literally means save us. Save us is the cry of children in our nation. Save us from gun violence. I'm going to tell you the statistics that you already know and ask that today maybe they break your heart open. There have been 125 mass shootings already this year. There have been almost 1,000 people killed by gun violence in our country in 3 months. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children in this country. I know you know these statistics, but let them break your heart. And let the children's cries fall upon our ears. Hosanna, save us. Let their cries change our paths. We have a choice. Which procession will we join? Will we join the procession of militarism and violence, where money and power drive politicians and businesses to continue to allow profit to be the highest value and guiding practice? Or will we join the procession that demands that human life is more precious than profit? Children's lives are demanding a peaceful alternative, and Jesus calls us to join the procession, to face Jerusalem, to leave the comfort of our homes or our online presences, our personal ideas, and to participate in the public square. Hosanna, save us. Where are we headed? We saw the characters in our reading wrestle every step of the way with adoration and excitement, and then uncertainty and criticism, perhaps a desire to distance themselves from the controversial Christ who shows up on Palm Sunday. When we hear their cries, we are forced to make a conscious choice. Where are we headed, and who are we following? It can feel insurmountable to confront such entrenched powers and big-moneyed interests. I know that I have felt all too powerless this week, searching for ways to do something to make a difference. But Jesus calls us to not give in to despair, but to continue the journey to seek pathways towards peace. Reverend Berenice Miles wrote that peace and reconciliation become possible when common folk with uncommon courage oppose exclusionary practices and policies and together stand with the one who comes in the name of the Lord. History is replete with the stories of common folks who have recognized that we are able to accomplish more together than we can alone. Stories that we might reclaim and rehearse as we continue our Lenten journey towards peace. They include the women and men who provided safe passage on the Underground Railroad for people seeking freedom from chattel slavery. We can remember Dietrich Bonhoeffer and others in the Confessing Church of the 1930s, who took a definitive stance that their loyalty was to Jesus as Lord, not to Hitler. Or youths in South Africa who stood against apartheid and formed the African National Congress Youth League in 1944, under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, envisioning together a world in which racial domination would no longer exist. There are so many other examples we could point to, from the freedom movement of the 1960s to those who worked to create restrictions on the sale of tobacco and cigarettes, movements for the right to vote, ends to war and occupations around the globe, where ordinary people, common people with uncommon courage, have followed in the footsteps of the one who points the way toward peace and liberation. Friends, we walk into Palm Sunday with the knowledge that confronting power has its cost. But we hear the cries of children saying, "Hosanna, save us." Where are we headed? Which procession will we join?